Hey, Teddy, you gonna say hello?
Mhm.
Oh, can we say that louder? Yeah.
Hello.
How about
Aw,
hello? That's better.
very sweet.
Much, much better. Because
Let me see if Clayton will come over and Clayton.
well,
Come here, little man. Oh, let's
he-
see. We'll see. Clayton is not, Clayton is very dog-like, although he's not quite the performer. Hi, Clayton. You want to come here?
oh, that would be lovely to see Clayton.
Yes. Come on. Come here.
Hold on just a minute. You're gonna see a cat in a minute. And
Now he's going to attack the tripod in a second. So,
oh, all
okay.
right. Well, Teddy is very wet because he's had a walk that involved both rain and snow, and
Aw,
so a shower was required when he got home.
poor
So
thing.
we're gonna say hello and welcome to Pet Talk.
Mm.
Hello and welcome to Pet Talk. That's it. Good boy. From Teddy and me, Anna Isabel, and today our fabulous guest, who is Gwen Cooper, one of my
Hello.
writers about all things cats. Hello, Gwen.
Hello.
So, you have wonderful books about cats, and the latest one, You Are Pawsome, 75 Reasons Why Your Cats Love You and Why Loving Them Back Makes You a Better Human. Do you know what? There is nothing in that title I don't understand.
Well, I guess it's a long title, so that's a good thing that it is easy to follow despite its length.
It's just, I think I'm a better person for the 3 cats who are in my life, and of course, Teddy.
Of course.
Because there's something about living with animals where we're having to empathize with creatures who don't speak our language. We're having to read them, do our best for them, think about them instead of us. So it's a really important thing, isn't it?
I agree. And I think there's also a real purity to these relationships. And we always talk about the purity of our animals' affection for us. But that really does go both ways, and possibly even more so, because, at least to our animals on a practical level, we are a source of food and shelter and things like that. Whereas when we bring an animal into our home, I mean, yes, obviously there are things we are looking for companionship and love and all of those wonderful things. But at the end of the day, we are making a commitment to support, like I will feed you and shelter you and take care of you and love you, regardless of what your personality is. And despite the fact that you can do literally nothing for me on a practical level now or ever, it's not even like they're going to grow up and maybe take care of you one day when you're in the old folks home, like your kids will. So there is a real purity to those relationships. And I think sometimes we don't, give ourselves enough acknowledgement for that, because we are rightfully so noting the purity of our animals' affection for us, but it really does go both ways.
It does. I think you're right. And really, this is a lesson in unconditional love that we are, excuse me, that we are engaged in. Because
Absolutely.
I had 3 wonderful cats whom I adored, every single one of them. 2 of them were more temperamental. And the middle one, my boy Maxie, was so easy to love. He was just sweetness personified, and he was interactive and he was wonderful. Cleo and Honey, I also adored and were equally lovable in different ways, but I think they weren't as easy, if I can put it that way.
Absolutely.
They were demanding. Cleo was very independent. You had to love her for who she was. And yet at the same time, she was incredibly loving, incredibly affectionate. And particularly as she matured, she became much more demonstrative of her love and affection for us. And Honey came to us well, I used to call her my baby old lady. She came to us very, very elderly, and with a thyroid condition and a voice that would put an opera singer to shame in the middle of the night. Um, so she had some problems, but I loved her for all of those things. And of course, I say loved. I love her for all of those things because I haven't stopped loving them, the three of them. So two of them had some challenges attached to them. But it really is unconditional love, because it doesn't matter what any of them would have done. It doesn't matter what Teddy does. I just adore them. So you're right.
Yes. And I think, people who live with cats, and I say this as somebody who was born, grew up with dogs. I always lived with dogs. I am absolutely an equal opportunity animal lover, but we get different things out of different relationships. And so I definitely think that one thing, I feel almost like my cats have part of what I have gotten out of those relationships are life lessons that I started learning at a very young age when at a young adult age, like that I started learning in my early 20s when I first started living with cats, because for example, the first cat who I lived with was a cat very much like the cat you described. It really took a period of years for us to forge a genuinely close relationship. Although the seeds of it were always there at the beginning. I've written about it extensively, so I don't want to belabor the point, but one of the first things I had to learn was that the cat was not in my house. I had not adopted a cat to treat me a certain way or make me feel a certain way about myself or cuddle with me a certain amount. The obligation really went one way. It was my job to take care of this creature. It was not her job to entertain me in return, much as I might want that entertainment. And then with that, of course, came the corresponding learning to love her for who she was and not who I had, having grown up with dogs, expected a companion animal to be. This is all, by the way, the book is it gets a little more serious at times, but it is, I will show the cover, definitely a very lighthearted little book. So I don't want anyone to feel like you're going to open this book and it's going to, this is a light read, for sure. Yes.
And it made me laugh so much because it reminded me of so many things, so many of those little things that each of my cats brought me. It just, you're talking about the computer and cats and computers. Honey, my third one, what did she used to do? She if I was typing, she would want to type with me. Her little paws would begin to move on the keyboard. She just wanted to be a part of whatever I was doing. It was adorable. So many things. Maxie, my second one, he used to open doors for me. So if I had my hands full and it didn't involve doorknobs, they just needed to be pushed, I'd say, come on, Maxie, open the door for me. And he'd open the door for me. So many things that you talk about that just triggered memories. I love that.
So this is actually the second book in a series. The first book is called Possum, Head Bonks, Raspy Tongues, and 101 Reasons Why Cats Make Us So Happy. And in that first book, which I wrote during quarantine, so I wrote it in 2020, and one of the 101 reasons that I had was cats can control NASA spacecraft, which is not technically true. However, in the early days of quarantine, when NASA engineers, much like everybody else, were sent to work from home, they would be controlling, orbital telemetries and things of aircraft in space from home computers. Some of them had cats. And so there was a Twitter chain going on among them at one point, like, how do you keep your cat from changing the trajectory of a satellite when you get up for a second? And so, yes, certain things are definitely universal. Cats liking to play with computers is for sure one of them. Probably you and I, though, however bad it ever gets with our cats, have never been in a situation where like a Mars rover starts to drift off course because Sparkles the cat has commandeered the computer. So
I'd forgotten that story. And just for our viewers, I think, Gwen, you were probably you were the first person I interviewed for Pet Talk. And it was just around the release of your book. And you were telling that story and I'd completely forgotten it. And it just has made me laugh all over again because I could just see it. It's just wonderful.
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, I mean, and this one engineer, he had two cats named Sparkles and Buttons, or Sparkle and Buttons. And Sparkle apparently really liked to take over the computer when he was not on it. And it caused a couple of sticky situations over at NASA before they got it under control.
There was something else as well where you were talking about, the fact that they like to lie on our chests.
Yes.
And that was Maxie's thing. And he was the heaviest of my three.
That's always the way it seems to work.
Yeah, I mean, he was so solid, he was really dense, of course, because I think the boys are more solid than the girls,
Yeah.
or more dense. So he weighed a lot. And every night, unfailingly, he'd come and lie on my chest just as my breathing was getting deeper and I was falling asleep. And sometimes I used to say, Maxie, I can't breathe. And he'd just come off at that point. But it was just, the weight of him as I was trying to breathe deeply and falling asleep. At some point in the night, I'd wake up and he'd be on my chest again. So
well, definitely, stay like being uncomfortable because our cats are very comfortably lying on us is definitely that is for sure one of the 75 reasons why our cats love us and why loving them back makes us better people. Because yes, I mean, again, I think that's absolutely, I can't even tell you how many times I've sat there with a leg that is just completely fallen asleep or like a chest that is way too heavy for me to breathe. And, you're like, I could take it for another 10 seconds and he's so comfortable. And you sort of play that game with yourself until it really gets to the point where like, you just can't take it anymore.
The worst one is when, needing to go to the toilet when one of them is so cozy on our lap. What is wrong with us that we can't say to our cats, okay, it's time now. I need to get up. I need to go to the toilet.
They look so comfortable. They're so happy. I'm not the person to ask that question to because I am a born sucker and animals know it. I mean, there's a squirrel in my backyard who bullies me for peanuts now. So,
I actually think it's the production of oxytocin. I think that when we are snuggled up with our cats, or in my case these days, my dog, we are producing oxytocin and it just feels good and we don't want it to end. I think it's that simple.
I think there's probably a lot of truth in that. I mean, really, like first and foremost, and with cats, dogs, I think with any companion animal in our house, there is that tactile pleasure of a warm fur, it is really a wonderful feeling.
And we do know there is evidence now that when we are stroking them, we are producing oxytocin, which is this wonderful feel-good love hormone, and that they are also producing it. So it's a two-way thing. We're all producing oxytocin, and I suspect that is playing a large part in I feel so good, I don't want this to end, that keeps us with dead legs and full bladders.
You're probably right about that.
How many cats have you had to date? Or how many cats have you had the pleasure and honor of living with to date?
So 5 cats, and then 1 foster cat who was here temporarily. But five cats who, let's say, were part of our family. Not 5 cats at one time. I had my first 3 cats. And then when the older 2 passed away and it was just Homer was my blind cat, who I wrote my first cat book about, Homer's Odyssey. And he was a very, very social cat. I think more so because he was blind. And I think he just liked knowing there was someone else, you know, like when my husband and I were out, that there was somebody else in the apartment with him. And so after he passed, after the older two cats passed away, you know, we fostered an older cat to see if that might work out. It did not, for various reasons. And so we adopted two kittens, two litter mates. I did not want to, you know, at that point, he was about 13 years old. So I did not want to inflict one kitten on him. But I figured two kittens, they could entertain themselves, and he would certainly be aware of their presence. You know, he would not feel alone in the apartment. And so we adopted Clayton, who is a three-legged cat, and his litter mate, Fanny. We lost Homer a couple of years later, but I mean, they definitely did. So, you know, he really went into a deep kind of mourning period for our older cats. And so they definitely brought a lot of life back to him, which was good. You know, it was a really, I don't think I've ever seen an animal just mourn. Sorry, that's the mailman. I don't think I've ever seen an animal just mourn, you know, for another animal. The way that Homer did for his older siblings. I realize we're getting away from the subject of this book now, but yeah, so that was when we adopted Clayton and Fanny.
It's not difficult. I mean, it's very easy to stray from the subject when we're talking about Homer, because I read your book. It remains my favorite animal book.
Thank you very much.
And I remember laughing. I remember crying. And it's just making me think I want to read it again. Actually, just thinking about it. What a wonderful experience it was for you to have him in your life. So it's not difficult to stray into talking about Homer. And I am going to put a link to the book about Homer, as well as this one in the description box, because if people haven't yet read it, they must.
Well, I thank you. That is very kind. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and I mean, it really is this extraordinary thing where Homer, I mean, this August, it'll be 10 years since he passed away. But he has really never stopped being a part of my everyday life, because I wrote this book about him, because, you know, books don't have expiration dates, right? So people keep reading it for the first time. And so this is their first, they keep writing to me having just discovered Homer. And so it really has just become, I mean, in a way that I never thought about or considered when I first sat. I just thought I had a good animal story to tell, like the kind that I like to read. And but it really has been this extraordinary thing where I mean, in a sense, I haven't had to say goodbye to him in the way that I have, you know, some of the other animals who I've lived with over the years. Even though I mean, I realize he's not here, but he is just still this very much a present in my life.
Well, you know, the thing is that part of, in fact, for my other channel, In the Light Growing Your Soul, I interviewed a lovely lady recently called Vanessa May, who is a holistic bereavement counselor. And she started her work as a result of the loss of her 23-year-old son. And the thing that we were talking about, because I also I'm an analytical hypnotherapist, so working with people who are bereaved is something that I often do. And we were both talking about how important it is, in a sense, that people are given permission to keep their loved ones after they've passed. So this is a lovely thing in many respects for you. I imagine it must have been very hard at first, but now it's, as you say, it's like he's a part of your life every day because of this wonderful book that you wrote about him. And I think when I think about my 3 cats, when I lost each of them, all I wanted to do was talk about them. And that's all I wanted to do. And of course, why? Because I was holding on to them in that particular way. And then when things calmed down a little bit, I realized, yeah, they're, they're very much a part of me. And funnily enough, there was a kind of running joke between me and my partner, because we never seemed to have any pictures of anyone or any of our animals visible. They existed, we had hundreds, but they were not in frames, on walls or whatever. And the moment they died, that's when suddenly the pictures would emerge everywhere. Because it was our way of holding on to them. We made a conscious decision not to do that with Teddy. So there are pictures of Teddy around. And we've added a few of us. So that feels really nice.
Because people know that there are actual people who live in your house, right?
Exactly. Not just, our house isn't just, what would it be? A memorial.
Right. A shrine to the animals in your life. It's funny. I would say, we have a lot of pictures. My husband and I have ourselves and friends and family, and like you, we have many, many hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures of the cats. But typically we don't really display them. Although I will say, it's interesting. A few months ago, I went to Albania for 3 weeks to lead a writer's retreat that was part of a wellness and creativity retreat. So it was like a lot of writing classes and yoga, basically. And I was teaching the writing classes, and my husband gave me to keep on my bedside night table. Like he hid it in my suitcase that I found this little box when I was unpacking, and just like candy and whatever, little silly things like that. But 2 little tiny framed pictures, one of the 2 of us together and one of the cats. And I was like, I think this is the first time that I've had a framed picture of my cats to just like put on my night table. And and people came in and saw them. I was like, yeah, I'm that person. I am the person with the pictures of cats next to my bed. But I realized that it was the first time that we also don't really have pictures of the cats in our house. Although certainly you are aware of the cats when you come into our house. Clayton in particular is very, very social, and just throws himself indiscriminately at anybody who enters the house. So
I love that. Not living with a cat now, I often think, oh, I'd so love to. But I think Teddy likes cats too much. And I don't mean that in a sarcastic way or ironic way. He grew up before he came to live with us. And he came to us at 8 weeks. So in the very first formative weeks of his life, he lived with 2 Siamese cats. And I think he's got some sort of memory of those cats, because I have pictures of him at about 7 weeks with the whole litter of puppies chasing this cat, this this apparently incredibly patient cat who would put up with all these puppies. And so there's this wonderful picture of Teddy in the lead, and all the rest of the litter behind him running. And then the next picture is the cat leaping over them to escape them. And so I think that he has this very deep memory of cats being a source of fun. And so when he sees a cat, he is absolutely beside himself. He doesn't know what to do. And I can tell it's not the prey instinct.
right.
It's not that. He just doesn't know how to engage with them. He wants to be all over them. And as we know, cats do not appreciate that.
Do not feel the same way.
However, he did have one feline friend named Peanut. So a friend of mine had a young kitten who wasn't, in fact, sadly, he died, I think, at a year or just over a year, but he wasn't quite right. He was sick, but what he had was this amazing stillness, and she brought him to our house. And one day, she hadn't told me she was going to do it. She just turned up with Peanut. And Teddy just thought it was Christmas. It was all of Christmases. And
Look what somebody brought just for me.
yeah, in one of these kind of papoose things that,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, and we went out for a walk in the woods together. Teddy just walked by her side with the most adoring look on his face the entire time. And when we did allow him to get close to Peanut, because Peanut was quite tolerant, he was just so excited. I had to make sure that, he came away, because he'd start barking excitedly. And I'm thinking, oh God, poor Peanut. It's just, so he.
And the day Peanut had a heart attack.
Yeah, so he did have one lovely feline friend, and that's just the wonderful thing. I've managed to get him to a point where we can walk and he can see a cat in the street and not bark at it. We're still lunging and trying to desperately to get to it, but we're not barking, at least.
Well, I'm sure the neighborhood cats appreciate that much control.
It's funny, isn't it? Because what goes through our animals' minds, we don't know.
No, we have no idea. I mean, we try to guess. I can tell that Clayton gets jealous when somebody else is getting attention instead of him by the way he, tries to shove the other cat out of the way. So things like that, I feel comfortable in guessing that I know what's going on in his mind, but there is always that element of mystery that I think, and probably them for us too, like they don't really know what we're thinking. And I know sometimes I see them trying to figure it out and not liking the conclusions that they're coming to. So I some of that goes both ways. Clayton, although right now is letting me know that his lunch is late.
Well, you're right. And I love seeing them work out what we're doing, because you can read it on their faces, can't you? The way they're at you. And if you're this is more so with Teddy, but when I ask him to do something for me and he just stops and I repeat myself and he looks at me and then he goes off and does it. So it's like he just needed a few seconds to understand what I was asking him to do.
Right.
And then he goes off and does it. And with the cats, it was similar, not the same, but it was similar. With Honey had this wonderful routine of trying to decide where she would sleep in the mornings after breakfast. And I would walk, she wanted me to walk with her around the house while she made up her mind. So I'd show her all the possibilities. I'd say, well, would you like to be here? And I'd be talking to her and she was deaf. So she couldn't hear me, but I'd still be talking to her because somehow at some level she understood. So
well, she could probably feel the vibrations of your voice. I mean, Homer had a way, he couldn't see, so there were a lot of visual cues that he missed, but he still took in a lot more information about his surroundings than you would expect. And of course, some of that was because his other senses were just so incredibly heightened.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I mean, I could see with her, she did know we were talking to her, and she was making the eye contact, and I'd say to her, "Would you like to be here?" And she'd do the equivalent of, "I'm not so sure." So I'd say, "Well, what about there? Would you like to go there?" And we'd go around the entire house, and then she'd go, "Okay, I know," and she'd go to one of the places that I had shown her. Now, that kind of interaction is just precious, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it definitely is. Although I will say again, and Clayton is now more insistently demanding that I give him his LUNCH. He knows the word. He knows two words. He knows his name and he knows the word lunch. And he thinks that every meal is lunch. Like he thinks breakfast is also lunch and dinner is lunch. He thinks that that's the one word that he is, and he's looking at me now as I keep repeating it.
I feel I owe him an apology.
Believe me, he'll live.
Oh, so he can tell the time.
Yes, I mean, like all cats, he knows exactly exactly what time you're supposed to. The clocks go ahead an hour next week. It's always always an interesting time in our house when the clocks change. It takes the cats a little while to catch up.
Maxie was our timekeeper. Of the three, it was Maxie who knew the time. But where you knew that he knew the time was he was always out for exactly the same amount of time. So he would leave, he'd be out for the same amount of time, and he'd come back. So it was like clockwork, which is why when he went missing and was home an hour and a half late, I was out of my mind. Because yeah, and what had happened was he'd been attacked by another cat and was lying low, afraid of coming.
Poor thing.
And I had been going out, calling him, looking for him, because I knew where his hangouts were.
Yeah.
No Maxie until finally, after about an hour and a half, when I went again for the third time, he came running and leapt into my arms. So it's almost like they sometimes when they're afraid, they go a bit feral, they forget.
Yeah.
They don't recognize. And I think it took him a long time to calm down to be able to recognize my voice. And then, of course,
I think that's very true. And my cats are more skittish than they should be, all things considered, but I've definitely noticed the same thing.
Now, so this is wonderful. We've been talking about our cats. And this is the very reason why I love your book. And
well, thank you so much.
The book is 75, You Are Awesome, 75 Reasons Why Your Cats Love You and Why Loving Them Back Makes You a Better Human. The reason that I love it is precisely the source of our conversation. It will bring up all sorts of things that you recognize that will make you laugh. If you are living with a cat right now, you'll love it. If you aren't, but have done, it'll bring back wonderful memories. So Gwen, thank you so much for your time today. I know Clayton needs his lunch.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on and for bearing with me with the various cat related shenanigans happening in the background.
It's an absolute pleasure. And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be looking at how to raise a puppy in the kindest way. Until then, goodbye.